Hello, I'm Ian.
And I'm Lauren.
And welcome to Lesson 2 of our Huntsville.
Today you'll learn about what pioneer life was like and chores you would have done if you lived during those days.
Today's vocabulary words that you need to look for are chamber pot,
Founding,
hearth,
homestead,
land speculator,
rural,
settlement,
and Twickenham.
And now here's Tim Hall with your lesson.
Thanks, kids. Now, in our last lesson, hardworking families were living in the communities surrounding the big spring. They used the rich soil to grow crops and to help build their homes. A cabin or house with 2 to 3 rooms and a small barn or shed for tools and animals was a settler's homestead. The homes were built using logs, clay, mud, and sand. Rooms were often used for more than one purpose. The entire family slept together in the bedroom, and it was sometimes used as a sitting room.
Often there was just one bedroom and the entire family slept there. The mother and father would often have a really nice bed, sometimes a big 4-poster bed. There were a trundle bed underneath their bed for siblings, brothers and sisters. And then there was a cradle that maybe the baby of the family would sleep in, and that would be close to the mother. But children slept together more than they do today in the same bed. They slept in a cradle longer than they do today. But the entire family would sleep in the bedroom, and they often would sit in their bedroom when they got up in the morning. They may have a morning snack in their bedroom and use it as a little sitting area. So it was, they often used their rooms for more than one purpose.
The small space inside a cabin made it tough to have almost any privacy at all. Most rooms were used for several things, and the most important room was the kitchen. The kitchen was used to eat and prepare meals, entertain visitors, and for children to study their lessons. The fireplace was always the central spot for families. It provided heat, light, and a place for cooking. Iron pots and iron utensils were used to cook over the open hearth fire.
We call it open hearth cooking, but basically it's just a big fireplace, like a big stone fireplace. And inside of that would be a fire. And they would use big iron pots to do their cooking, and then iron utensils to move those pots in and out of the fire, because you couldn't just reach in the fire and grab it with your hands. And so the hearth is just a fireplace, a big stone fireplace with a fire and lots of cooking utensils, and like I said, even the irons to iron their clothes with.
All family members had chores and responsibilities. There were daily jobs to do to keep the house in order and to care for the fields. Children tended to the garden. Families ate what they grew and hunted. Each day was a specific chore day.
Little boys might carry wood, and they would keep the fire going, or they would help their father and do chores for their mother. Little girls, again, would learn to sew at a very early age and start sewing for the family. Children would also work in gardens. You know, they didn't have Winn-Dixies and Kroger's. They only ate what they either grew in their garden or what they would go out and kill and hunt for. So there were lots of garden chores to do, there was house cleaning chores, and there were certain chores that people did on specific days of the week. We don't do that as much today. For instance, Monday was wash day. Every Monday was wash day, and clothes would be washed outside over an open fire, and that might be a chore that children would help with, keeping the fire going, just helping with the washing of the clothes. Tuesday was ironing day. Now that all the clothes are clean, they had to be ironed on Tuesday. Again, with those big irons over the fireplace. Wednesday often would be a day that ladies would mend their clothes and sew on Wednesdays. Thursdays, they would do chores in the house, cleaning. Friday, they would bake. Saturday, they would bake. In anticipation of Sunday, and also working in their garden. So they were very organized people in the early 1800s to get all of their chores done in a week's time and then start all over again on Monday morning.
The settlers lived in the wide open spaces, rural area, which forced them to take care of their tools and other belongings. It was a long trip to the general store for supplies. The family members respected each other and cooperated. Children didn't have many friends because their neighbors were not very close by. This made their siblings their closest friends. The older children in the family took care of the toddlers and infants while mother and father tended the farm and did the chores.
Now, keeping a close eye on a large farm was a very tough job, but families adapted special tools and gadgets to protect the young.
Today we have safety caps, and so you open a cabinet and a little child can't get into the medicine. But in 1819, medicines were kept in what is called an ugly jug. And the ugly jug would have a cap on it, and the parents would say, don't mess with the ugly jug, it will hurt you. So any kind of medicines or even cleaning fluids or lye for their lye soap, all of these things were kept in an ugly jug, and it was literally a jug that was very ugly, and it was supposed to scare the children.
Part of family cooperation required a respect for privacy and personal time, especially close quarters like a little two-room house.
Back in the 1800s, if you had to go to the bathroom at night, well, the bathroom was not inside your house, and you may not want to go out in the dark, and you may not want to go out in the cold. So you would use a chamber pot that was in the bedroom. And in the morning, somebody would have to empty that. And during the day, they would use an outside bathroom, which was called different things at different times of our history. Often in Huntsville in the early 1800s, it was called the necessary or the necessary house, and you had to go outside to the necessary. It was not as convenient as our bathrooms.
John Hunt was among nearly 5,000 people coming to the Tennessee Valley to form a settlement. The settlers claimed land to farm and live on without paying for it. They were called squatters. The land was actually owned by the United States government.
My name's Leroy Pope. I bought the land around the Big Spring in 1809 at public land auction. I gave Huntsville its first name, Twickenham. I'm sorry, Mr. Hunt, for making you leave before the citizens taught me into renaming this town after you.
In 1809, President James Madison gave the squatters a chance to buy the land. Leroy Pope, a land speculator and real estate agent from Georgia, bought much of the land that is now Madison and Limestone counties. Later, he sold the land in sections to other wealthy settlers. Leroy Pope is credited for founding Huntsville. He first named the community Twickenham in memory of his favorite poet, Alexander Pope, who was born in Twickenham, England.
The squatters who had remained here still called it Hunt Spring or Huntsville. They never had accepted Twickenham because that was a highfalutin name. It sounded funny. They'd never heard of it. They were not educated people. And they just didn't like it.
In 1809, Pope and many of his friends from Petersburg, Georgia, and parts of Virginia resettled in northern Alabama, and they started to create a community here.
The streets of the new community of northern Alabama were named for Revolutionary War heroes.
Remember, they knew Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, Monroe. They knew those people. And they named the streets for them. Of course, they were the revolutionary biggies.
Schools, churches, and a courthouse were built. History states that John Hunt didn't have enough money to buy his property. Hunt and his family moved further out of town. Historians believe he settled in the area near Brand Spring Park.
People, I think, felt bad that John Hunt had had to give up his cabin because he couldn't afford to buy the land. And so a part of that remorseful feeling went into the renaming of the town as Huntsville.
Now let's check in with the Our Huntsville kids.
And now here's a look back at today's vocabulary. Chamber pot, a pot used in a bedroom as a toilet.
Founding, starting a community.
Hearth, the floor of a fireplace extending into the room.
Homestead, a farmhouse with adjoining buildings and land.
Land speculator, a person who buys land and sells the land for a large profit.
Rural, a community of farms or open country.
Settlement, a colony or a village.
And Twickenham, a city in England.
And now back to Tim.
Join us for Lesson 3 when a small boy gets a big adventure in our town in the early 1800s. For our Huntsville, I'm Tim Hall.